It's such a privilege and honor to have gotten this opportunity to engage in a conversation with the leader, the founder, and CEO of Teach for India. Ma'am, I'm excited, and I'm sure the audience are equally eager to know more about you and your perspectives on leadership. To begin with, what does leadership mean to you, ma'am? And how has your understanding evolved over a period of time? And are there any specific instances that you would like to share with us?
Kids always ask the most difficult questions. Hi, everybody. It's such a tremendous honor to be here. Before I answer your question, as I was sitting listening to the analogy of the forest as well, I went back in my mind many years ago. I was in a similar conference in the US, and there were about 1,000 educators debating how to make education better. And I remember in that moment thinking, I want to be in a space that feels like this in India. And here we are. This is, I know, version 3, but the first time I've been here. So I feel just deeply grateful that we've come together to really talk about education. What does leadership mean and how has it evolved? I feel everything in my journey has evolved so dramatically. I often tell people, if you were to ask me the same question today and 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would probably find a completely different answer. But I think to me today, where leadership has evolved is moving away from the front of the room kind of leadership, where there's one leader and many followers, to actually this idea of the forest that we just heard, where everybody is leading and everybody is following. And you learn when it is right to lead, and also you learn when it is right to follow. And I'll give you an example from yesterday. So yesterday I was visiting a government school here, one of our schools where we place TFI fellows. And I walked into a grade 3 classroom. There were 70 children in this classroom with a brand new teacher. And I was, my heart always beats a little bit faster. How is this teacher going to manage 70 children sitting here? She was doing a fantastic job. And she taught for about 10 minutes. And then she said, and now Sadia ma'am is going to take the next part of the lesson. So I fully expected an adult to walk into the room, another teacher, to take the lesson. And up jumps this third standard little girl, this big. Her name is Sadia. And she comes to the front of the room, literally stepping over children because there's no room to move, and teaches the class for the next 15 minutes. And she taught exactly like that fellow had been teaching, including telling the group, loud and proud voices, please, children. And it was unbelievable. But to me, that's the new paradigm of leadership. That in our classrooms, can every single child lead, and can every single child follow? So I think that's one. And the second, if I were to just choose one more thing to share, is I think leadership is a lot about love. And it's something I've come to believe more and more and more is just so needed in the education system and then more broadly in the world. If as leaders, we can love at every level, starting with ourselves, if we can love and accept who we are today, if we can really love our children, love our work, love the vision, love the people we're doing this work alongside, I think when you love, there is nothing you cannot do. And so those are two thoughts that come to mind.
Thank you, Mom. I would really aspire to be the third grader. Mom, my next question is, when we contemplate the term leader, a typical image that often arises in my mind is like a Batman or a Superman. Do you anticipate leadership evolving in this new age? And what are the qualities that you foresee as an essential for future leaders?
Yeah. I mean, one of my biggest self chosen mentors talks a lot more about laddership than about leadership. It's interesting. I don't think it's yet a recognized word in the dictionary, but it's a very powerful idea that as leaders, are we really being ladders for other people's potential? Yesterday night, I was having dinner with a group of TFI alums, and they were asked to go around the table and share what they need from me, like questions. And I listened to all of them, and then I was like, I don't have a single answer to their questions because they are so far now on their own journey, and they have achieved so much and they are achieving so much. And so I think like the leadership of the future, the multiplier of leadership is our ability to really like hold the ladder and allow other people to climb. So it's a shift in power in my mind from holding a lot of power to sharing a lot of power. My biggest hope for the education system is that we shift power to our children. I think we often think that as adults and experts, we have the wisdom to solve the problem independently. I don't believe that we have done that as adults. And I think it's time now for us to really say the 260 million children in our schools are not children who we need to educate. They are children who can work alongside us to educate every child in India. And that shift in power can be very, very radical and significant. And I think when you give kids that agency, even when they're really young, to say, you know what, you're a little bit like kinder than most children in the class, you lead in that way. And you're a little bit better at math, you lead in that way. If we can share that power with children at all levels of the system, I think we will go very far. And I think one other trait I'll add for leadership is, again, the analogy of the forest was so interesting to me. I think often we're conditioned to think that we learn in school and college and then that's it. We're sort of set for life. But I think the leadership of the future is like this hunger to continuously learn through your whole life. And if we're able to do that, I think, we know this with plants. If a plant doesn't grow, it dies, literally. And yet, as human beings, do we understand that? And are we in constant pursuit to stay humble, to continue to know what we don't know, and to continue to learn?
Thank you, ma'am. That was really thought provoking. When we contemplate, okay, sorry, ma'am. Moving on, ma'am. I've learned that a leader unites the team. However, I also believe that a leader should collaborate. It's well known to us that when everyone come together, progress accelerates. Having said that, will future leaders require greater collaboration? And if yes, how can they achieve it?
Yes, yes, yes. That's my answer. I mean, I think there's, I'm getting much older now, and I used to believe as a younger person that I mean, I really did think at one point that I would change the world in my complete lack of wisdom. And then I got a little bit older and I said, the world's a big place, maybe the country. And then a little bit older, not the country. And over time, I realized I can't even change my own two daughters at home. But I can really change myself. And I think that feels like a big evolution for me. When you realize how little you can do, you also realize how much you need to work with other people to achieve anything. Having said that, I think just also acknowledging that working with other people is the hardest thing in the world. We all struggle so much with this, like even within our own organizations and our own teams. And so I often think about like how much time are we spending really building the muscle to learn how to collaborate, because collaboration I don't think is just about a skill, and it's not just about time. We often use time as an excuse to not be able to collaborate. I actually think it's about ego, and it's about like how do you let go of the things you believe strongly in order for the collective to move forward. So I think it's very, very critical and very difficult to do, and it's going to require us to do a lot of work. And I think earlier the talk a little bit was about dialogue. I think the biggest thing that's going to shift leadership is our ability to dialogue. And I worry more and more that it is getting harder and harder to raise our voices and to express an opinion that is different. And I think a lot about how do we hold safe spaces in our schools for our children to be able to dialogue. Just last week, I heard this horrific story from a Teach for India school in Pune, where government school, where grade 7 children went to the grade 3 classroom, and these grade 3 children are literally this big. And they found the Muslim children and held the Muslim children up and wouldn't put them down until these children agreed to chant Jai Shri Ram. 7th standard, 3rd standard children. I think there is increasing fear in our schools for our children, our educators, and civil society to be really dialoguing. Whatever your perspective is, are we able to listen to different perspectives and hold those perspectives and understand that I may have a political affiliation, I may have a religious affinity that is right for me. In the same way, am I equally respectful that India is large enough for someone else to have a different perspective? So I think dialogue feels like a very important part of the story.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sure these valuable insights are adding great value to many leaders gathered here today. Ma'am, I'm sure you will agree that these days, the pace of change is rapid. Will leaders need to acquire new skills? If yes, how can they excel in adapting to new changes?
All your questions are yes, yes, yes answers. Yes, I think most of our schools today are not even catering to the present, they're sort of catering to the past. What is this future going to look like 15 years from now that our children are going to graduate into? We collectively actually have no idea. And so developing the skills to continuously learn, to upskill ourselves, to leverage new technology, to be really agile, to forget old ways of working, to learn how to unlearn. I think these are some of the skills. And I think the implication for our education system is a really big shift away from learning knowledge for kids, because knowledge today is accessible, you know, at a drop of a hat, to really teaching our children skills and the skill of how to learn. How do I navigate through the vast amount of information that's coming my way and misinformation that's coming my way? I think that's a skill we need to be teaching our children. So how to learn, how to be courageous in a world that needs us to be courageous, how to speak up, how to find purpose, how to be agile. These are all very new skills and very difficult skills to teach through the school system.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm really curious to know about this. If you had the power to fulfill one big dream for the entire world, what would it be? And what makes it personally important to you?
I mean, as soon as you were in the middle of that sentence, the word that came to my mind was peace. I want peace in the world for every single human being. I recently read this atrocious statistic that there are 400 million children in the world who live in zones of war and violent conflict. 400 million children. When we see, as we sit here thinking, like there's a pit in my stomach thinking about a child today sitting in Gaza, sitting in the Ukraine, closer to home, many spaces as well. I think a world where the operating principle is love and not hate. How do we really understand the tremendous power of that? And I don't think that's any one or two big things. I think it's millions of people saying, in my everyday life, how do I operate with love? I was teaching my kids last week. I teach a group of kids in Pune, and we were doing a lesson on love. And at one point in the lesson, I said, these particular kids have just moved to a new school and they're not very happy in their new school. So the lesson was around trying to understand why are they not happy in this school. And at one point in the lesson, I said, I'm going to just read out statements. Just put up your hand if this applies to you. And I said, I have shouted in school. 100% of kids raised. I have hit someone in school, 95%. I have judged somebody. I have humiliated somebody. They literally, 95% of kids raise their hands for 100% of the questions. We make so many mistakes in our own lives, and yet we're so judgmental of the other. How do we learn to look inside and say, in my own life today, with the people around me, can I build the muscle of kindness, of care, of love? I think the sum aggregate of that force of love is what will change the education system and is what will make the world better.
Ma'am, I'd like to know how students like me can make it happen.
You are the only ones who can make it happen, literally. I think the first starting point is asking that question. I think if kids believe that they can, they may not even know the way, that doesn't really matter. But asking the question and believing that I have a role to play, I'm not a leader in the future, I'm a leader today, whether I'm in grade 1 or grade 3 or grade 5. We've seen the most exceptional examples of things that children are doing. And I think it just starts with, one, adults getting out of the way and letting kids live into their own leadership, and kids standing up and just trying things. Like, I think, the simplest way to think about what to do is to ask yourself, what do you care about shifting? Really ask yourself that. Identify that thing. It may be a tiny thing, it may be a big thing. Then try to imagine, what will the world look like if that problem gets solved, and get really excited about that idea, and then just go out and try. And you will keep falling and keep failing, and it doesn't matter at all. Keep standing up. I'll say one last quick story. 3 days ago, I was in Pune, walked into a classroom. It was an art room, and these kids were doing patterns. I'm very interested in art, so I sat down on the ground with them, and I asked one girl if I could work with her on her sheet. And so she was drawing patterns on one side, and I was drawing patterns on one side. I didn't have my glasses. And so I went a little bit outside of the line, and I felt so bad because she'd worked so hard on her side. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake, and I went out of the line. And the grade 6 child, she turned to me and she said, Didi, she said, you know what? It's not only okay to make mistakes, it is good to make mistakes. And I said, where did you learn that? And she said, my Didi taught me that. So I think, step up, be as bold as you can, think about what you want to shift in the world, and then just fearlessly go out and do it. And don't worry the number of times you fall. And then share your journey with other kids, because the more you share, the more other kids will look at what you've done and be inspired to take their own journeys.
Thank you, ma'am. Ask not what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for the country. By John F. Kennedy is today's contemplation. And Ms. Shaheen is our living proof. It was indeed an immensely insightful interaction, ma'am. So the key takeaways for us could be to love and lead the right way, to shift power through leadership, Change yourself and lead the way through love and peace. Again, I'm so fortunate to be a part of this, Mom. Thank you.
Thank you.